Hello, everybody, and welcome to Facebook Friday. It's Friday the 26th, beg your pardon, it's Friday the 25th of the 6th, 2021, and I'm Kate Wakelin. I'm the Net Patient Support Nurse with Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia, and each week we do a broadcast into our private discussion group to really talk about a topic of the week and address something that is relevant to people with NETs. So before I go any further, I would just like to take this opportunity to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land that I am broadcasting to you from, which is the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and just want to especially take a moment to respect elders past, present and emerging. Something that I know you know about me, and I say this every week, but it never gets tiring for me. So I'll continue to say it, which is that I love living where I live because it's very close to quite sacred body of water called the Yarra River, which in the Woiwurrung language is called the Burrung. And I love to go running along that river, and I indeed went for a very foggy and rainy run last night. So, you know, these things continue. So anyway, it's lovely to have some people join. I can see that I seem to have set up the technology correctly because there's people commenting, which is awesome. So just before I start talking about what I wanted to address today, I just did want to say, give a shout out to all of our unicorns in the Greater Sydney and Wollongong areas, knowing that it seems to have really settled down in Melbourne, which is lovely for those of us in Melbourne, but I know it's a really stressful time for people in New South Wales. And actually there's been quite a few little outbreaks and sort of spot fires with COVID. So I just want to acknowledge that actually that takes a toll on everybody's mental health when we're all watching the figures and the news and the press updates and watching that interaction between journalists and politicians and policymakers, and it can be really high stress, and make us all feel maybe more edgy about everything, and those around us feel more edgy about everything too. So I just wanted to acknowledge that up front today, that that's happening. So today I'm going to talk about metaphors and mantras. And those, you'd have to be living under a rock not to know this news, but an announcement was made over the past week that I've actually tendered my resignation with Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia, which has been a very difficult and big decision for me. And you know, there's lots of information out there about all of that. But in terms of the Facebook Friday I've got this week, and I've got next week, and actually next week, I'm skipping right to the end to give you a kind of a plug for next week's video. We've actually had Dr. John Layden booked in for months to do a spot with us next week looking at anaesthetics and NETs, and we're going to absolutely keep going with that one. That's actually my last day in the office that day. So this week I get to talk about something that's really important for me that I really want to leave you with. So yes, today I'm going to talk about metaphors and mantras, and I'm going to explain about what those things are as we go through, and maybe between us we can kind of come to some understandings about ways of using those things as tools for us in dealing with our situation with NETs. So what are mantras and metaphors? So let's start with metaphors. So a metaphor is when you say something is like something. So a handy one that a lot of people talk about in cancer is, well, cancer's like a roller coaster. You go up and you go down. Now, I don't know, the most recent experience of going on a roller coaster actually wasn't really very much fun. I used to say that it's like a roller coaster, but roller coasters are supposed to be fun, and you spend a lot of time really thinking that this is a good thing to have invested your whole cold hard-earned on. But my most recent experience at a roller coaster was pretty bad as well. So maybe it's more like a roller coaster than I thought when I was younger. But it's saying that a thing is like another thing. One of my favorite metaphors for neuroendocrine cancers is to say it's like you've got a dog and you've got to work out whether it's a Labrador or a poodle. And if it's a Labrador, if it's a jumpy one that pulls off the washing off the line, or if it's one that likes to sleep on your couch in front of the fire. So metaphors can be really helpful in describing something that's really difficult to capture otherwise. And sometimes using a metaphor can help us explain something to someone else, and that you can see when a metaphor really captures something, you know, the penny drops and you get that, now I get it kind of moment. And sometimes when someone uses a metaphor with you that captures your experience, it can have a similar effect. It can actually make you feel like you've been really heard and really understood. So it's a really powerful tool. So what about mantras? What are mantras? And a mantra is a saying that helps us, essentially. So it's like a motto. It's like something that we can, you know, a bunch of words, you know, a catchphrase, something that we can kind of come back to and go, you know, this is like my life motto or my motto for dealing with cancer. And the one that comes up really frequently in our Facebook private discussion group and in our unicorn community is never ever give up, or NEGU. And I wanted to talk particularly about that mantra today because I think it can be really, really helpful. But I also know sometimes people struggle with how to apply that in a really complex life with NETs. So I think I want to give the background to never ever give up, because I know that actually this has been kicking around for quite a lot of years, and people might not know the background story to that mantra. So a number of years ago, there was actually a gathering and the Minister for Health, I think we're supposed to call him the Honourable Greg Hunt, was actually visiting our CEO, Simone Layden, and making an announcement of some funding that was going to be used for some resources for NETs, which was really exciting. And we had a number of patients who were able to make their way to that gathering. Minister Hunt swept in, and there were some photos and some, you know, nice things happening and some speeches made, and then, as you would imagine, he's quite a busy man, he left quite quickly. But there was one of the lovely things about that event was that there was a chance to really talk with each other about you know, what it's like to be living with NETs, and for the patients who were there to really be sharing with each other about where they were at. And it was lovely, actually. It's always, I know that it's really interesting. Oh, now someone's saying my video's not playing, so that's interesting. It's working on my screen. So look, I am recording it. So if all else fails, we'll put up the recording. Just sort of regroup myself. So we were at a gathering, and there was the never ever give up phrase that was actually used by one of the patients when they were talking to another person and just saying, this is helpful for me. I never ever, and thank you to the person who's just said, I can see you. That's awesome. That's very reassuring. I was sitting here thinking, am I just talking to myself? It's all good. So yeah, one of our dear patients said to another one of our very dear patients, I never ever give up, you know. And it was really, I guess, capturing that, a bit of that roller coaster, a bit of that, gee, it can look dire one day and then you get good news the next scan, and you never know what's really around the corner. And on the scan it can look pretty scary, but actually there's a backup plan. There's plan A, there's plan B, there's plan C. I'm never ever giving up. And it sort of resonated in that conversation. And from there, you know, I think there was a conversation that kind of grew in the Facebook group as a result of that, and thus never ever give up, or NEGU, was kind of adopted by our Facebook private discussion group. And for those who are watching on YouTube, we've got about 1,500 people in this group, so it's quite a community. Oh, one thing I know, when I was going to say, when I was worried about my video dropping out, was that one thing that I've observed over and over and over about our community with neuroendocrine cancers both in Australia but also internationally, is that I know in Australia we often call our our patients, unicorns. Because you're special and unique and very rare, but also because we were called the Unicorn Foundation many years ago. And so we call our community members unicorns. In mythology terms, a gathering of unicorns is called, like the collective noun for unicorns is called a blessing. And I see that so frequently when I'm in a space where there's unicorns gathered, and I see that really special bond, that almost instant bond and connection that happens, and the magic that can really flow, which is just something that's so special that I've observed over many years. So back to NEGU. So that's how it started. It was actually from a patient gathering. Someone was talking about their experience and said, this is my approach. And it really resonated in that resonated in that conversation, and it resonated with heaps of people from there. So again, they can be really helpful. It can be so encouraging for someone to say on a hard day, never ever give up. Like it's like another way of saying, hang in there, I've got you. But I guess when it's a mantra that's known by the community, it's a way of going, I see you, I know this struggle. And so this is the phrase I'm using to say, this is not just empty words. This is like, I know this is really tough. And this is my way of encouraging you and telling you to hang in there, and I've got your back. So I see that so many times when people have got difficult news to share. That phrase will often come up, and I know it's really, really helpful for people. Sometimes mantras can be unhelpful too, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. 1,500 people in a Facebook private discussion group, and even more in the broader community, not every phrase is going to work for every person. So some people, onwards and upwards is a great way of looking at life. For other people, it just feels like hard work. Always look on the bright side of life. For some people, that just evokes a whistle and a glint in the eye and a cheeky smile as they remember an old movie that makes them laugh and lighten up a little bit if they're feeling a little bit heavy and stressed. For other people, it sort of trivializes their suffering. So it's very, very personal. And look, there's a big range of unicorns, isn't there? Like, we're like dogs, aren't we? There's going to be so many different approaches to living. And so with mantras and also with metaphors, it's often about finding what's going to work for you, what's going to capture things for you, and then working out what you're going to do when something is said or something is given to you or something comes to mind and it's not helpful. And I guess the first step is acknowledging it, that there is not an expectation from anybody that this will be helpful for every single person with NETs, because we know life is just much more complicated than that. We had a community member, and I'm going to say her name because it was, she was very public about her, nearly said journey, which is another metaphor that a lot of people don't like. But she was very public about her experience with NETs, and she died a couple of months ago. And Helen was known to many and dear to so many in our community, in our broader community, from Queensland. And she had T-shirts made up with NEGU, with a beautiful design, because she was an artist and photographer, of a unicorn horn with, and it had Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia, or it might have been Unicorn Foundation back then, but it had our logo on it. And so, and even when Helen died, and even after she died, I know that even Evan found that mantra helpful. So for her, it was really interesting, because a lot of people say to me, well, how does this work? Does this mean that if my disease is progressing, or I'm very ill, or the person I'm caring for is very ill, and maybe that means that they're stopping some treatment or making some important decisions about maybe quality of life over quantity. And there's sometimes the big decisions that we need to make with NETs. And so sometimes people wonder, well, does that mean I've got to give up on my mantra? Because surely never ever give up is sort of at odds with taking steps like that where it can feel like you're kind of giving up. And I guess my argument would be, well, what are you giving up on? If you see never ever give up as never ever give up on a cure, well, we know that not every person with NETs is going to be cured of their disease. Now, sometimes it's still really helpful for an individual to be keeping that as their end goal, and and they will have scan after scan that shows disease that is, that is very much there. But they still feel that sense of hope for a cure, and that's absolutely fine if it's working. Like if that is the thing that's keeping your nostril above the waterline and helping you cope with your day-to-day life, that's absolutely fine. And there is hope long term. There is lots of hope for a cure. We've got lots of clinical trials in progress as we speak. So, it's not stupid to think that way. You're not putting your head in the sand to be thinking never ever give up for a cure for neuroendocrine cancer Australia. But I think it's also, you can also look at it in some other ways, which might be helpful in that kind of season. Sometimes it's about never ever give up on your family, or or that your family are never ever going to give up on you, and that is more about them having your back, being there to support you on the good days, but also on the days that that aren't that great, where you're not feeling that flash and where you need some support and some help, where you might be feeling fragile emotionally. That it's almost like an acknowledgement that you don't have to pretend, because no one's giving up on you and they're here for you thick and thin. I think you can never ever give up on quality, on pain control, on symptom management, on knowing that your treatment team are there for you and not giving up on you either. And importantly, with the neuroendocrine cancer community, it doesn't matter where you are in that journey, whether you are just newly diagnosed and looking at a really fantastic prognosis where you may never ever get that tumour back ever again, right through to people who are living with very serious illness and difficult to manage symptoms. I think it is a useful mantra for the group to say, yeah, we're never going to give up. We're not giving up on each other. We're not giving up on our community. We're not giving up on our unicorn blessings, as it were. So I think the other thing I just wanted to say is that sometimes in families there can be a mismatch. So sometimes the patient will be like, yeah, never give up, NEGU, and the carer might be looking at that person and going, well, that's okay for you, but I'm not actually feeling like that's really resonating for me. And it's okay to be different. And we know the experience for carers is going to be really different for the person with the tumour. We hear that over and over again. And actually in our carers Facebook group, one of the lovely things that has emerged over the past few months is a slightly different mantra, which is never walk alone. And actually someone's had a drink bottle engraved with that mantra because it was so powerful for them in their journey caring for their unicorn. And so if you have a carer who needs some more support, then that's a really important place that you should know about. And I'll make sure there is a link to that page in the notes. But I just find it, I find that often the conversations for carers is different for those who are living directly with the tumour themselves. We've got people who are both too. We've got a few people where both partners have tumours and also caring for each other. So that's complex. That's a really rare unicorn, that is. But we know often the experience is different depending on what perspective you're standing from in, looking at this experience of living with NETs. So I'm not sure if that helps, but I would just encourage, and I'm going to actually, we've got Simone coming in shortly to join us to talk a little bit about how Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia is also not giving up. And I think this is really important because sometimes when there is a transition in staff, especially when it's been one person in a role. It can be unsettling in there. So there can be that thought of, well, who's going to look after us in the interim, and what's the plan? And so I know Simone's going to be joining us very shortly, and hopefully she's watching the feed, so she'll see this. But I just would really encourage you to find what works for you, find the words that work for you. If someone suggests a mantra or a metaphor that doesn't work for you, it's okay just to let it flow straight past. There's no judgment on you if never ever give up is, just it's empty. That's absolutely fine. There's not the expectation that we are all the same, but it's just a matter of finding your own path, again using a different metaphor, and maybe sharing it with others because they might resonate with that too. I'm having a little look at the comments because there's some beautiful comments here. So yeah, I can see that a few people have had trouble with the video. So hopefully it's recorded okay and we can make sure it's up later. Someone just said, I never ever give up. I get it, it's awesome, but I like to qualify it and add a bit more and allow myself days where I do give up, as in embrace my vulnerability. Days where I want to roll around in all the mud. Feel the authentic dark feelings, not deny, because I think it's the quickest way back up. But we also see it through a different lens, eh? And look, that I think that's really that's a great metaphor actually too, looking at things through different lenses. So yeah, and thank you for that comment. And I would just encourage you, I'm just going to let Simone in to the conversation and check that her sound is working and that she can hear me. Can you hear me, Simone? Yes. So while Simone is sorting out her sound, I just wanted to, it's not a farewell, that'll be next week, but just in the group space, especially while we are in this transition phase, I would just really encourage you all to gather around each other, support each other in the words that are working to sum up your own situation, knowing that there will be diversity of experience and opinion. Something that's not helpful for you, let it wash past. Something that is helpful for you, give it a shout out, give it a hooray. The other thing I wanted to say was that I wanted to tell you a story about when I started with neuroendocrine cancer back in, which was Unicorn Foundation back in 2015. I felt like I had very big shoes to fill because there was a previous nurse in the role, and that nurse was adored by so many people. They made a fantastic impact on many people's lives. That nurse was extremely kind and generous and knew a lot. So there was that sense of having someone who was never ever giving up, that sense of this is my nurse. And when that person left and I came on board, I had a lot to learn. One of the things that was tricky was actually someone sent me a message, and I think they were in probably a bit of a dark space, and this is no judgment on them, but they said, we don't need you to say, I'll get back to you and keep learning. We need our other nurse back. And I have to say that cut me to the core, and I didn't sleep that night. I was actually really devastated and very strongly considering whether or not just to resign on the spot. It really shattered my confidence. And I think something that you should, as a community, you need to know about your health professionals is that we really do. We're only here for one reason, because we want to make a difference to people and we want to do a good job. So that, as I said, it shattered my confidence for some time. And you can see that I'm still emotional thinking that memory is very, very strong for me. It was quite traumatic. And I had some wonderful conversations with Simone, who was so supportive. I wanted to tell you that story because I'm leaving, and we fantastically, can I just say I'm very relieved to say that Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia has 2 positions available for 2 net nurses, and we're just working through the applications that are coming through at the moment. There's some really exciting people who we will be talking to about that. They are not going to know all of the things that I know, because I didn't know all of the things that I know now 5, 6 years ago when I was a baby net nurse. I need you as a community to be really supportive of these new nurses, because they will be nervous. They are going to come in, and I've already been a bit worried about, like, all the people, you're beautiful and you're all saying these beautiful things about me. The vast majority of which I don't deserve, because I'm just very, very, very human. But I worry about these nurses coming in on my heels and looking at all of these comments going, oh, Kate's an angel and Kate's wonderful, and for them to feel maybe that they're not going to be able to sort of fill those shoes or ever grow into this role. And they will need to grow into this role. There's no such thing as a fully formed, ready to go nurse. And I certainly, as I said, I wasn't. So I would just urge you to be kind. We're setting these nurses up with the most comprehensive policies and procedures and video tutorials on how to run things like Facebook Fridays that had me Googling until all hours of the morning. But they won't arrive knowing how to do all of this stuff straight away. So you're going to need to be patient with them. And the other thing that I would say is that in the interim between me leaving and these new staff starting, our wonderful Meredith Cummins will be monitoring the net nurse inquiries. Now, Meredith also has she actually has a pretty much full-time role with Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia, doing looking after the registry, looking after research projects, looking after health professional liaison. She's got so many other fingers in so many other pies. She is a really busy lady any week of the year. So it's going to be quite busy for Meredith. And that is not to say don't reach out. If you need help, certainly email the net nurse at neuroendocrine.org.au or call the 1300 number. That net nurse email and the 1300 number will be directed through to Meredith, and she'll monitor those messages. But be patient, because and probably if there is something that can wait for the new net nurses, or that you can maybe direct towards your healthcare team, that's probably going to give Meredith a little bit more of a chance to stay on top of things too. But, I have a lot of confidence in Meredith's ability to do that. She's covered me for annual leave in the past, and she knows a huge amount about neuroendocrine cancer. So we're very lucky to have her on the team. So, but look, can I just say before I go, and I'll say this again next week, it has been such a pleasure working with you all. I've learned an incredible amount, not only about Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia, and who knew there was so much to know. It's like Alice in Wonderland and exploring rabbit warrens. And as soon as you think you're done, there's another, there's more. But also I've learned so much about the strength of human spirit and the enormous capacity of humans to be kind to each other and support each other and gather around each other and be that blessing of unicorns that, gosh, in this hour of need, we really do need. Well, look, I'm going to take my leave, and we'll get Simone to hop into the private discussion group separately. Look, thank you so much, everybody, and take care. And I'll see you next week for number last for me with Dr. John Layden. So take care.
We are just following up on that conversation that we had around never ever give up. And it is really interesting that it does mean something different for everybody. And I know that, I've been a carer of family members with neuroendocrine cancer, and, it is okay. And I heard somebody say before, it is okay that some days you can't motivate yourself. You can't, you're allowed to feel lousy. But it is also, it is such a nice little motivation to do as well. So my little motivation to you is, whilst change is always very difficult, and we are very sad that our lovely Kate will be moving to other pastures, not greener pastures, other pastures. We are obviously working very, very, very hard in the background to ensure that we have some seamless seamless transition, and that you will never ever felt like you are being given up on, because that is not what I started the organisation for all those years ago. So I just thought we'd give you a bit of an update on what are some of the things that we're working on, whilst also obviously trying to grow the support service so that you always have somebody on hand. And as Kate mentioned, we've got Meredith, who's 30-year veteran oncology, neuroendocrine specialist, which is wonderful. So we're in such a fortunate position that she will be able to help out in the interim. But whilst we grow that service, I also just wanted to highlight just a couple of other things that we really hope will be making some really long-term change. And you may have seen that we were talking about and I've just realised, I hope that my microphone is working and that people can hear me. That's just another little trick that we haven't been looking at. Great. But that we are also working on which is the first of its kind and the first time it's ever actually been developed, not only here in Australia, but we believe overseas, is the optimal care pathway for neuroendocrine tumours. So we were really happy that this has finally been announced after many years of advocating. And so what that means is it actually puts neuroendocrine tumours on the same page, if you like, or actually validates that neuroendocrine tumours even exist as a cancer stream. And these are housed on the Cancer Council website. They're developed by an expert panel, and I'm really happy that I'll be able to sit on that panel to ensure that these optimal care pathways are relevant to our patients, but we'll also have some leading net experts on there as well. And what it looks like is, and you can look at them on the Cancer Council website or Google Optimal Cancer Care Pathway. There's 15 of them at the moment. It's covering cervical, colorectal, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and then we will have neuroendocrine tumours as well. And so it goes through the whole process from prevention and early diagnosis or detection, which we know is hugely key for our patients, and this is exactly what we want. Thank you to those people I can see who are watching. They also followed to presentation and initial investigations and referrals, so that we really hope that, when patients are actually diagnosed, that they're referred to the correct people. That is hugely important and obviously key to improving the outcomes for everybody. Diagnosis, staging and treatment planning. So again, it's about raising awareness with our GPs and our primary health care about what these are. And this is over and above or working actually in parallel with our RACGP modules, so that it's a really nice complement there. Talking about treatment and what those treatments are. So actually, again, really educating not only primary health care, but anybody who looks at these OCPs or optimal care pathways, about what the treatments are that our patients go through, from peptide receptor radionuclide therapy, everolimus, chemotherapy, sandostatin, lanreotide, all of those different treatments that our patients are on, and what that means and how they and what that means for the healthcare professionals to understand more. It's also, there's information around care and after treatment, management, supportive care. And I think all of this, again, what we're so happy about is that it actually shows that we exist. Finally, it shows that, this is a disease that deserves the acknowledgement that we know that it has needed, and it will be put there out in the open. And as we also mentioned, these are actually signed off on and reviewed by all the state health ministers. So again, that's really putting it into the different states and ensuring that these people now know and will know what neuroendocrine tumours are and what effect they do have on patients. So the other thing, look, there's a lot going on. There's Medical Research Future Fund grants at the moment that we're really, really pushing for as many applications as possible, and we're working on some very exciting things there with regards to some research trials, and we'll be able to talk a bit more about that hopefully very soon. But just know that we are at the forefront of that to ensure that, our patients have the opportunities to try and get on to clinical trials. So those will be sort of being put in by early August. And the other things happening in August, which we are really, looking forward to, is on the back of the optimal care pathway. Whilst that was one of our key asks from government to ensure that we get one of those, now that that's happening, we are going to be launching, whether we call it a white paper or whether we call it a awareness and action plan, looking at the next, one, actually raising awareness about what neuroendocrine cancer is, actually getting politicians and journalists and media to actually say neuroendocrine would be a huge feat. I think if we say it enough, we hope that it'll stick and that people aren't afraid of saying it and they don't say pancreatic cancer when it's actually neuroendocrine. So we will be launching that in the second week of August in Canberra, in the Dame Enid Lyons alcove. We've booked that, and so we've booked for, of course, COVID restrictions only allows so many, but for 50 people, and we're hoping there that we'll have the minister obviously open the event. We'll be able to talk through the publication and the paper and try and get as many policymakers there as possible, but of course, most importantly, our patients there as well. So for some of you who can think back to 2014, I believe, when we first marched on Parliament House in Canberra, we've got some beautiful photos of all of us in our T-shirts as we put forward our first petition. We will be organising a bus from Sydney down to Canberra. Let's just ignore let's pretend that there's no restrictions and that there's free movement. This is what we can hope for. So with all going well, we'll be organising a bus down from Sydney to Canberra for the afternoon, and it'll be a really great opportunity for everyone to get together, as well as our Canberra locals as well. And on that, we had a wonderful night in Canberra on Wednesday night. The beautiful David Lockwood did an exceptional job telling his story. And it was also wonderful to see Linda and Simon. And so we hope to see as many patients as we possibly can on that day, which is really exciting. And again, it's the first time, but it's the right time for us to be launching that and asking for additional resources, but also putting out and setting out our plan for the next 5 years of what our patients need and how can we improve our patients' lives. So following from that, the next day, we actually have we're hosting a Theranostics roundtable talking all about imaging, peptide receptor radionuclide therapy, what the future is, what clinical trials are coming up, what innovative technologies, and again, trying to raise awareness with the policymakers around access and ensuring that that access is ongoing for all our patients. And then for other tumour streams where there's showing promise in this space as well, such as prostate cancer. So we've got some leading experts there. We'll have panel discussions with all sorts of government officials as well as our academic experts as well. So that's just a little touch of what's going on. I think once August happens, or mid-August, we'll be breathing a little sigh of relief until we then push forward and ensure that all the things that we've put in place actually come to fruition. So I just wanted to let you know that, since there's been times that, it is difficult and you do think, oh, I'm just going to throw it in and this is just too hard. But whenever I've felt like that, I've always, again, I think Kate says, put on a big girl pants and get on with it, because you guys are all way too important. I'll get emotional now, to never give up on. So we are working very hard and we will miss Kate very much. But she won't be a stranger. I won't let her. I'm pretty annoying like that. So we will ensure that we keep going, and we will endeavour to do as much as we possibly can. So thank you all for listening. And I look forward to catching up with some of you next week, but also to ensure that I'll also not be a stranger and make sure I come in here a little bit more and see you all as well and update you on these really exciting plans. So thank you, everyone. Have a good Friday. To our friends in Sydney, we absolutely get it, and we hope that we get through this as quickly as possible, and have a great weekend. Thank you, everybody. Take care.